The morning my brother got married, I had $61,000 in my savings account. By the time the rehearsal dinner ended, I had $214. I found out at 11:48 p.m., standing in the bathroom of a Marriott in Niagara-on-the-Lake, still wearing the dusty rose bridesmaid dress my sister-in-law had picked out 6 months earlier. I remember the tile was cold through my stockings. I remember the faucet dripped. I remember thinking, this can't be right, and then checking again and again. And the number didn't change. Let me back up. I'm a physiotherapist. I finished my master's at McMaster when I was 25, and started working at a clinic in Hamilton, about 3 months after that. The pay isn't extraordinary, but it's steady, and I've always been careful with money. The kind of careful that comes from watching your parents float between boom and bust your entire childhood. My dad worked in oil and gas when Alberta was good. Then it wasn't. Then he tried contracting, then a business opportunity that I'm still not entirely clear on, and then another one. My mom worked the front desk at a dental office for 15 years, and held everything together with coupons and sheer willpower. I didn't have the luxury of being careless with money, so I wasn't. I started my TFSA the month I got my first real paycheck. I kept my expenses low, a 1-bedroom in Hamilton's East End, nothing fancy, cheap enough that I could put away $500 a month without feeling it too badly. For 4 years, that's what I did. Groceries on sale, coffee made at home, vacations that were really just long drives to places I could sleep on a friend's couch, slow and steady. That $61,000 was supposed to be a down payment. I'd been watching a small semi-detached near Gage Park for about a year. Nothing fancy, a fixer-upper really, but mine. In a market that had been strangling first-time buyers for a decade, I'd finally gotten myself to a place where a mortgage wasn't a fantasy. I had a meeting with my mortgage broker scheduled for the second week of October. My brother's wedding was the last weekend of September. He's 4 years older than me. We grew up close, shared a bedroom until I was 8, the way you do when money's tight, and even when we disagreed, which was often, I genuinely liked him. He's charming in a way I never was, the kind of person who makes friends in line at a grocery store. He met his now wife at a work conference 5 years ago and she's fine, she's perfectly nice, but the wedding they planned was, how do I say this? Ambitious for people who didn't have the savings to support it. I knew this because my mom told me. Not directly, not in so many words, but in the way she dropped things into conversation. They found a venue, but the deposit is a lot. Catering is more expensive than they expected. You know how your brother is, he doesn't want her to feel like she had to compromise. Small comments, scattered over months, each one a tiny stone in a pile I didn't yet understand, was being built for a specific purpose. In June, about 3 months before the wedding, my mom asked if I could help. She came over on a Saturday. I made tea. She sat at my kitchen table with her hands around the mug, and explained, very calmly, that my brother and his fiancée were about $3,000 short on the catering deposit. And would I be willing to cover it, just temporarily, just until they got back from the honeymoon and sorted their finances? $3,000. Okay. It was a lot for me, but it was my brother's wedding, and I had savings, and I said yes. She asked if she could be added to my account, just temporarily. She'd been helping my brother coordinate some of the vendor payments, and it would be simpler, she said, to be able to transfer directly. I said I'd just do the transfers myself, and she said, and I remember this very clearly, that I was being difficult, that she was trying to organize a lot of moving pieces, that it would only be for 2 months. I said okay. I want to say something about that moment, because I've had a lot of people ask me, later, after everything, why I did it, why I let her. And I understand the question. I do. But what I don't think people understand if they didn't grow up in a family like mine, is that no to my mother was never a neutral answer. No was a confrontation. No was selfish. No meant listening to every sacrifice she had ever made enumerated in a single conversation, until you felt so guilty and so small that you would have agreed to anything just to make it stop. I said yes because I'd been taught my entire life that saying yes was what you did for family. That's not stupidity. That's 28 years of conditioning, so she was added. And for a while nothing happened that alarmed me. The catering deposit went through. There were a couple of other small transfers. A florist's invoice here, a rental charge there. Things that seemed plausible. Things I noticed but didn't question too hard because I trusted her. Because I thought I knew what this was. The wedding itself was beautiful, I'll give them that. The venue was a restored barn about 40 minutes outside Niagara-on-the-Lake, the kind of place with exposed beams and string lights and a sunset that looked staged. I stood up at the front with the other bridesmaids and held a bouquet of white dahlias and watched my brother cry when she walked in, and I thought, this was worth it. Whatever it cost, this was worth it. That night, at the hotel, I was texting a friend about logistics for the following morning and I noticed my banking app notification from earlier in the day that I'd swiped away without reading. I opened it. Then I opened the full account screen. $214.62. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and I just stared. My brain kept doing that thing where it refuses to process what it's seeing. I refreshed the page. Same number. I went to the transaction history. There were 4 withdrawals. The largest was $47,000, made at 2:14 in the afternoon, while I was getting my hair done for the wedding. The others were smaller, made over the previous 2 weeks, $8,400, $5,200, $300, all from the same source. My mother's access. I called the bank's fraud line from the hotel bathroom at midnight. The woman on the phone was patient and thorough. She walked me through the transactions, confirmed they had been made with authorized account access, and told me that because my mother was listed as a joint account holder, not just a secondary signer, the withdrawals were technically legal. She wasn't supposed to say that. I could hear the hesitation in her voice, but she said it anyway. She told me to contact a lawyer. I did not sleep that night. In the morning, there was a wedding brunch at the venue, mimosas and eggs Benedict, and a slideshow of photos from the previous 15 years. I sat across from my mother and I watched her laugh at something my aunt said, and I thought about $61,000. I thought about 4 years. I thought about the semi-detached near Gage Park, and I didn't say anything. I picked up my fork and I ate my eggs and I was perfectly normal, because I needed to think before I acted, and acting in the middle of my brother's wedding brunch was not thinking. She noticed I was quiet. She leaned over at one point and touched my arm and said, "You okay, honey?" I said I was tired. She nodded like she believed me, or like she didn't care whether she did. I drove home to Hamilton alone that afternoon. My brother and his wife had already left for their flight to Portugal. My mother went home with my dad, and I sat in my car in my parking lot for probably 20 minutes before I could make myself go inside. I called my best friend. She's been in my life since we were 11. We met in a French immersion class in Guelph, and have somehow stayed close through every relocation and career change and crisis. She came over that night with Thai food and a very good bottle of red wine and sat on my floor while I explained everything. "You need to call a lawyer Monday morning," she said. "I know, not Tuesday, Monday, I know." She stayed until 1 in the morning. That helped. I did call a lawyer that Monday. She specialized in civil litigation, and had a very calm, matter-of-fact manner that I found grounding when most things felt like they were spinning. She explained my options carefully, because my mother had been added as a joint account holder, not a limited signatory, which is what I had intended. She had full legal access to those funds under Canadian banking law. However, there were potential grounds for a civil claim, based on fraudulent misrepresentation. My mother had told me the access was for a specific limited purpose, and the withdrawals significantly exceeded both the scope and the amount I had consented to. It wasn't guaranteed. Nothing in civil litigation is. But it wasn't nothing. I also went to the bank. I had my mother removed from the account, immediately that same Monday, and I spoke with a frauds specialist who helped me document every transaction with timestamps and stated amounts. He was genuinely kind. He said, "I'm sorry this happened to you." And it was the first time someone in an official capacity had said that, and I had to look at the ceiling for a moment to keep myself together. I didn't confront my mother for 3 weeks. I needed the documentation in order first. I needed to know what I was dealing with. When I finally called her, I didn't yell. I'd expected to yell. But when I heard her voice on the phone, what I felt wasn't rage exactly. It was something colder. Something that had been sitting in me long enough to settle. I told her I knew about the withdrawals. I told her I had documentation and I had spoken to a lawyer. I told her I wanted to know where the money had gone. There was a pause, and then she said, "We were drowning, Waverly." That was the first time she used my name, Waverly. She almost never calls me Waverly, she explained, and I use that word loosely. That my father's most recent business venture had collapsed, and that he owed money to people. Not a bank, not a formal creditor, but people, and that the situation had become, in her words, urgent. The $47,000 had been used to pay off the debt. The other amounts had covered interest and what she called fees. "Why didn't you tell me?" I said. "You would have said no." She said it so simply. Not defensively, not with guilt. Just factually. She knew I would have said no, so she didn't ask. She just took it. "Your dad needed it more than you did," she said. "You're young. You don't have a family yet. You'll earn it back." I remember looking at my kitchen wall. There's a small framed print there I bought at a market in Kensington. Just a simple botanical illustration, nothing special. And I looked at it while she talked and I thought, she genuinely believes this. She is not performing. She believes on some real level that what she did was a form of redistribution. That my savings were a family resource that got allocated to the highest need. That's the part no one prepares you for. Not the theft, really. The logic. I didn't tell my brother right away. He was in Portugal. And honestly, part of me wasn't sure what telling him would accomplish. He'd always been the one who smoothed things over, who said, "Mom just worries," who found ways to reframe her behavior, until it became something livable. I didn't want to hand this to him and watch him sand the edges off it. I told him when he got back. I met him for coffee at a place on Lock Street and I showed him the transaction records on my phone, and I watched him go through the same stages I had. Disbelief, confusion, the mental arithmetic of the amounts, and then a very long silence. "I didn't know," he said. "I know you didn't. Waverly. We didn't ask her to do this, I know." He called my mother that night, from what my friend later told me. She'd heard from his wife, who heard it from someone else. Small town information networks even in a city. It was not a calm conversation. My mother's position, apparently, was that she had done what needed to be done. That the family was in crisis. That I had money, and they needed it, and that's what families do. My brother's position, to his credit, was that that was not what families do. He called me back the next morning. He said he was sorry. He said he and his wife wanted to help me recover what was lost, that they'd contribute monthly. Whatever they could manage. I told him he didn't have to do that. He said he wanted to. We didn't talk about our mother for most of that call, But near the end he said very quietly, "I didn't think she'd actually do something like this." "I know," I said. "I didn't either. The civil claim took several months. I'm not going to go through all of it, because honestly it's tedious and stressful, in ways I don't want to relitigate. The short version is that my lawyer was able to establish that my mother's access had been granted for a specific purpose, the wedding vendor payments, and that the $47,000 withdrawal was so far outside that scope as to constitute misappropriation. My mother did not get a lawyer, which was a mistake on her part. She came to mediation and tried to explain herself, and what she said in that room confirmed, on the record, that she had intentionally withheld her plan from me because she knew I would refuse. That helped. I didn't recover everything. I want to be honest about that because I think stories like this sometimes wrap up too cleanly. I recovered $39,000 after legal fees and a negotiated settlement. The rest, my dad's gambling debt, the fees, whatever else it went to, was gone. I had to recalibrate my timeline by about 2 years. I also stopped talking to my mother. That's not a decision I made dramatically or all at once. It happened gradually, the way most real things do. First I stopped answering the phone every time. Then I stopped answering at all. She sent texts for a while, some apologetic in tone, some less so, some that said things like, "I hope you're happy now that the family is broken." I read them all. I responded to almost none of them. My brother and I are still close. His wife, and I didn't expect this, has been quietly, steadily kind through all of it. She texted me on my birthday. She remembers things I mention in passing and follows up on them later. I didn't think I'd end up with a sister-in-law I actually liked, but here we are. My dad called once, about 8 months after everything. He didn't really say sorry. It came out more like an explanation than an apology. The difference being that an explanation positions what happened as something that occurred, rather than something that was done. But he called, and he was sober, and he said my name, and I don't know. I told him I needed more time. That's still true. I moved into a condo last spring, smaller than the semi-detached I'd had my eye on, but mine, with my name on the title and no one else's. There's a good running path nearby, and a farmer's market on Saturdays, and a Thai place 2 blocks down that has become something close to a ritual. I have a new bank account. I have exactly 0 people with joint access. I have a direct line to my financial advisor, a woman named. I genuinely cannot explain how much I vetted her, who talks me through every decision and has made it very clear she works for me and no one else. I moved my emergency fund to a separate institution from my main accounts. I don't discuss my finances with family. Not ever, not the amounts, not the goals, not the timeline, nothing. People ask me sometimes whether I regret not seeing it coming, and I understand why they ask. There's a kind of logic to it, an idea that if you look closely enough at the warning signs, you should have been able to predict the shape of the disaster. But here's what I actually think. I didn't fail to notice the signs. I noticed them. I just trusted, more than the signs warranted, that the person who raised me had some limit she wouldn't cross, that there was a floor somewhere there wasn't. That's the thing you have to learn to hold. Not with bitterness, exactly, because bitterness is exhausting and requires ongoing maintenance. But with clarity. Just clear eyes about who people are, separate from who you needed them to be. I'm 31 now. I wake up most mornings before my alarm, which I used to hate and have gradually made my peace with. I make coffee. I look out the window at the street below. It's a quiet street, mostly, a little slow in the mornings, and I think about the day. Not about what was taken. Not about the number. Just about the day. I earned it back. Not because I was young and resilient and all the things she said I was, like that was an excuse. I earned it back because I worked for it, and because I was careful, and because I decided very early that the version of myself that existed on the other side of this was not going to be smaller than the one who went into it. You are not the bank account someone emptied. You are not the amount. You are not the debt someone else ran up and handed to you without asking. You are allowed to close the door, change your name on the account, and build something that belongs entirely to you. That's what I did. That's what I'm still doing.